So we're here live and exclusive in Murray Walker's study, a study laden with mementos and awards and everything related to motorsport. And here is the great man himself, Murray. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. And well, where do we start with you, hey? Where do we start? What a career!
Well, I've been very lucky, Ian. I've done it for a very, very long time, and I've been lucky in that I was talking about what is my passion, because motorsport matters more to me than anything else, and I've been enormously privileged to be at the centre of it all for as long as I have, because I've been able to know and talk to and talk about all the famous personalities in Formula One since 1978 until 2001 when I retired, and I'm still very much in touch because I do stuff for the BBC and I write a column for a F1 racing magazine. It matters a lot to me, and I regard myself, as I say, as being very lucky to have been able to do what I have done.
Now, you're sorely missed. You're still, I would call you a national treasure, Murray. Why do you think you were so popular as a motor racing commentator?
Well, it's nice of you to say so, Ian. I like to think it was not particularly because I knew a lot about it, which hopefully I do, and that I was able to inform people about what was happening during the races, but mostly for my enthusiasm. It's difficult for me to commentate on my commentating style because that's me, but I used to stand there, and I always stood, and the words poured out of me, and I was passionate and enthusiastic about the whole thing, because I always regarded it as my responsibility to make the people who were watching me and listening to me on the box as enthusiastic about the sport that I love as I am.
Well, you certainly were enthusiastic, and you know, you were famous, Murray, for your Murray Walkerisms. It's almost a new phrase in the English dictionary, yeah. Which it was part of you, and we're laughing about this now. I think everybody loved you even more for some of the things that you said. Remind us of a few.
The car in front is absolutely unique, except for the one behind it, which is identical. There's nothing wrong with the car except it's on fire. Torbay's hopes, which were previously nil, are now absolutely zero. And now Lafitte is as close to Sura as Sura is to Lafitte.
Well, I mean, you didn't think about these things, did you? They just poured out.
No, you don't. I mean, you are standing there and you are having to communicate as much as you can every nuance of an extremely complicated, fast-moving, high-stepping, colourful and dangerous sport, and you haven't got time to think about, shall I say it this way or shall I say it that way. You say literally the first thing that comes into your head, and regrettably in my case, because I was always tremendously fired up about the whole thing, regrettably sometimes the words came out in the wrong order and sometimes the wrong words came out. But you haven't got time to think, oh, I said that wrong, I didn't mean Prost, I meant Senna, because by the time you've thought that, something else is happening. And if you try to correct yourself, the public will be saying, why isn't he telling us about what's happening now?
So rather like Eric Morecambe and his piano, with you, it was always the right words, but not necessarily in the right order.
In the right order, yeah.
I mean, I think probably because of the longevity of your career, you were struck by the curse of the commentator many, many times. And often, I remember as a boy, Murray, seeing you saying, and nothing can stop so-and-so from winning this race.
Here comes Prost, the gallant little Frenchman, on his way to his 6th Grand Prix victory. Nothing can stop him now. And he hit a patch of rain, wet track, and went into the Armco, and that was at Monaco in 1982. Yeah, I remember it.
And I remember sort of even like sports cars and going around some muddy tracks somewhere, going into bonnet first into a hill.
Yes, the advantage that he's got is that he's got a clean windscreen, as a result of which he can see exactly where he's going. As I said it, he went off the track into the bank and completely destroyed his BMW. Pete Van Dam, that was, a Dutchman.
Now, people under, say, 40 years old may not be familiar with the whole Murray Walker story. They'll be very aware of Murray Walker, the F1 commentator, but they won't know about the family background and your father, and they also won't know about your success in the advertising world.
Well, my background in a nutshell is that my father was a professional racing motorcyclist before the war, and a very good one. He won the TT in the Isle of Man. He won most of the Continental Grand Prix, and if there had been a World Championship in 1928 on the same basis as there is now, he would have been world champion because he was European champion. So I was born into it, and it's literally part of my genes and in my bloodstream. And I was in the army during the war. I came out of the tank regiment that I was in 1947 and got into the advertising business, and I worked with Dunlop and then with Aspro, the headache tablet people, and finally with two of Britain's biggest advertising agencies. I had a very long career at that, from 1937 until 1982, and I was associated with and responsible for the advertising of some marvellous brands like Mars Confectionery, Pet Foods, General Motors.
Let's just sort something out here, Murray. Mars and the pet foods.
Oh yeah, a lot of people, you're right, Ian, a lot of people think that I thought of a Mars a day helps you work, rest and play. I wish I had, because I would be a very wealthy man if I had. But that is not the case. I was the director in charge of the business, but I was also in charge of the Trill birdseed account. And we all know, don't we, that Trill makes budgies bounce with health, and even more importantly, that an only budgie is a lonely budgie.
That's down to you, Murray.
Well, I will guiltily take credit for that. And I was very lucky because advertising after the war was a wonderful business to be in, because it was upwards and onwards. Every year that I was in the business, my company had a record year. Every year, and I was in the business from 1948 until 1982, every year was better than the year before, and there's not many businesses that can say that. And my life in advertising and in motorsport has taken me around the world more times than I can think about. I've been to more countries than I knew existed, and I've been lucky to have such a privileged and enjoyable life.
Very difficult question to answer in about 1 minute, Murray, but 53 years of broadcasting, highlights and lowlights.
Highlights, and obviously there's a lot of them. Working with Nigel Mansell, seeing him become world champion, seeing Damon Hill become world champion at Suzuka in 1996.
Where you became very emotional.
That was when I got very emotional, and when he crossed the line I said, I've got to stop now, I've got a lump in my throat, which was perfectly true because I had known Damon for so long. Other highlights, sadly, it's a low light rather than a highlight. Having to commentate live on the death of Ayrton Senna, probably the most significant event in the history of motorsport, certainly in the history of motorsport television, because it changed so many things. I could go on, but...
Well, you mentioned Mansell. One of the highlights for people will never forget that glorious television moment when Nigel Mansell's there sporting a lump the size of a golf ball on his head.
Nigel had won the race. I think it was in Portugal. He's either in Portugal or Austria, I can't remember which. He'd won the race, and he was taking his triumphal progress back to the television interview room, standing up in the back of a car, waving at the crowd. And as he did so, he failed to see that there was a beam, an iron beam, coming towards him, and it hit him in the head. And Nigel, being the trooper that he is, ducked down, carried on waving, came into the commentary box, sat down, and I was about to interview him, and I said, Nigel, before we go any further, will you take your cap off? You've got an enormous bump in your head. And I stuck my finger right in the middle of his bump, and Nigel said, oh! And that was a television highlight for a very long time.